Waterboarding. The water looks harmless until it touches your face. Then, everything inside you changes. You're strapped down, tilted back, and a thin cloth becomes the line between breathing and dying. The moment the pour begins, the cloth seals to your skin, water floods your nose and mouth, and your lungs start begging for air they can't reach. Your mind knows you're in a room, your body thinks you're drowning. Here's what people don't understand. Waterboarding isn't designed to hurt you. It's designed to erase the distance between fear and death. The first seconds feel like confusion. The next feel like panic. Then, the body does something terrifying. It tries to inhale on its own. A huge, desperate reflex that rips through the chest even though the only thing entering is water. Your throat spasms. Your chest convulses. Your vision pulses black at the edges. And then comes the moment survivors describe the same way. The brain decides you're dying. Each second stretches long enough to question your own existence. You're not thinking about secrets or loyalty. You're thinking about lungs that won't open and a world fading into dark water. The physical toll is brutal. Gagging becomes choking. Choking becomes suffocation. Water burns the sinuses, scrapes the throat, and forces the body toward hypoxia. But the real wound is psychological. Survivors say running water becomes a trigger. Showers, rain, even a sink filling can make their bodies react as if the drowning is starting again. Supporters claimed waterboarding produced vital intelligence. But desperation doesn't create truth. It creates whatever makes the water stop. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed endured it 183 times. Abu Zubaydah vomited during sessions. Abdel Rahim al-Nashiri called it dehumanizing. Abu Hudhaifa was waterboarded, despite later being considered possibly innocent. Waterboarding doesn't break bones, it breaks instinct. And once you've lived through the feeling of dying again and again, a part of you never resurfaces. Stress positions. They don't start with violence, they start with stillness. You're not beaten, you're just told to stand. Arms out, knees bent, weight pushed into angles the body was never built to hold. It feels manageable at first. Then, the minutes stretch. Muscles tremble. Pain slides in quietly, settling deep behind the bones. Your body starts fighting itself long before anyone raises a hand. Stress positions are simple. That's why they're devastating. You're held upright, forced to kneel, or shackled so your joints lock and burn. No shifting, no relief, no moment where the body resets. Here's what people miss. Your muscles don't fail all at once, and they fail in waves. First the shakes, then the numbness, then the sharp electric shocks firing through your shoulders, hips, and knees. Nerves screaming like alarms you can't silence. Stay long enough and the joints swell. Limbs go numb. Basic movements become impossible. But the real break isn't physical. It's psychological. When your own posture becomes your enemy, helplessness sets in fast. You can't rest. You can't shift. You can't choose anything except how long you can endure the ache. The mind folds inward. Thought narrows. And then comes the moment survivors describe the same way. The pain stops feeling like pain and starts feeling like failure. Officials called it pressure. Survivors called it collapse. Abu Zubaydah's breathing strained as his arms gave out. Hanbali needed help walking afterward. Mustafa al-Hawsawi suffered nerve damage that required medical care. Muhammad al-Qahtani endured these positions. Stress positions don't tear the body apart. They let time do the violence. Stillness becomes pain. Pain becomes fear. Fear becomes surrender. And what finally breaks isn't your body. It's the belief that you can still stand on your own. Sleep deprivation. You don't notice the damage at first. That's what makes sleep deprivation dangerous. It begins like any long night. Heavy eyes, slow thoughts, a brain trying to stay awake when it shouldn't. But the hours stretch, then blur, and suddenly you're not tired anymore. You're unraveling. Your body stays alive. Your sense of reality doesn't. Here's the part people don't understand. The brain doesn't shut down when you deny it sleep. It glitches. Reflexes slow. Thoughts collide. Light becomes sharp. sound becomes loud. Then, around the third or fourth day, something terrifying happens. The mind starts generating its own reality. Not dreams, not imagination. Raw hallucinations. Shadows move, voices whisper. Your own thoughts answer each other like different people. The breakdown is steady and merciless. The body weakens, joints ache, hands tremble, vision doubles. The immune system collapses. But the mind is where sleep deprivation does its real work. Confusion becomes paranoia. Paranoia becomes delusion. And eventually, you stop resisting questions because you can't trust your own thoughts anymore. That's why interrogators used it, not to hurt the body, but to empty the mind. Abu Zubaydah went 47 hours without sleep, barely able to stand. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was deprived repeatedly until compliance replaced consciousness. Majid Khan stayed awake so long, his sense of time shattered. Muhammad al-Qahtani endured 54 days of disruption, his identity dissolving. Hambali drifted between exhaustion and panic, his mind tearing under the cycles. Sleep deprivation doesn't use force. It steals the one thing the brain needs to stay human, the reset between days. Take that long enough, and the world stops making sense. And eventually, so do you. Walling. It happens faster than the mind can process. One moment you're standing, the next your collar is yanked tight, your head snaps back, and the world becomes a blur of motion and impact. Walling doesn't look dramatic from the outside. A flexible wall, a controlled slam. But inside your skull, it feels like the earth just rose up and hit you. The first strike shocks more than it hurts. The second rattles your spine. By the third, your senses fragment, sound peeling away from sight, breath fighting panic. Here's what makes walling effective. The impact is survivable, but unpredictable. You're not thrown hard enough to break bones, only hard enough to break certainty. Your posture is locked by the collar. Your head whips back. Your shoulders pitch forward. The wall rebounds you like a spring. Pain blooms behind your eyes. Vision flickers. Balance dissolves. And survivors always remember the same moment. The dread before the slam hurts more than the slam itself. That half-second inhale, that frozen heartbeat waiting for the next impact. The body reacts automatically. Neck muscles straining, breath stuttering, migraines sharpening. Each hit shakes your orientation until you can't tell which direction is upright. But the real damage is psychological. Walling uses anticipation as a weapon. It turns your own heartbeat into a countdown you can't escape. You don't fear the slam, you fear the second right before it. Officials called it safe. Survivors called it degrading and impossible to endure without slipping mentally. Abu Zubaydah was slammed so often, interrogators said it softened him. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed said the humiliation cut deeper than the pain. Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri was walled during questioning about the USS Cole, leaving him visibly shaken. Mustafa al-Hawsawi endured it as part of a cycle that shattered his mental footing. Walling doesn't rely on brute force. It relies on rhythm, a rhythm you don't control, a swing you can't predict, a moment of dread that becomes torture on its own. By the time the wall stops hitting you, the fear doesn't. Because somewhere between the impacts, your mind learns to flinch at the silence. Cold temperatures. Cold doesn't scream. It doesn't strike. It just waits. Slow, quiet, patient. Until your body starts begging for warmth it will never get. At first it feels like weather, a shiver, a tightening of the skin, a breath that fogs in front of your face. Then the temperature drops lower, and the cold stops feeling like air. It starts feeling alive, crawling under your flesh. Muscles clench to trap heat. Teeth rattle. Breath turns sharp, as if the air itself is cutting you from the inside. The cold digs deeper than pain. It stiffens joints, numbs limbs, turns your skin into something your body is slowly abandoning. Here's what most people never think about. When the cold sinks deep enough, it rearranges your mind. Thoughts slow, speech slurs, decisions slip. Even fear feels frozen, sluggish and distant. The longer it lasts, the more the body fails. Shivering becomes trembling. Trembling becomes weakness. Weakness becomes the slow slide toward hypothermia. Blood retreats from the fingers. Organs brace themselves. The world sharpens into something thin and hostile. And humiliation makes it worse. Being stripped, soaked, or left exposed isn't just discomfort, it's degradation. You're not fighting interrogators anymore. You're fighting the environment. And the environment is winning. Survivors describe a moment when pain stops being pain and becomes pure survival. Just keep the next breath warm enough to stay alive. Abu Zubaydah shivered uncontrollably in near-freezing rooms, soaked until he could barely speak. Majid Khan endured ice baths that left him shaking for hours afterward. Gul Rahman never made it out, left naked on a cold floor until hypothermia shut him down. Muhammad al-Qahtani weakened as the cold seeped into a mind already unraveling. Cold temperatures don't rely on aggression. They rely on time. They wait. They wear you down breath by breath. And once the cold settles deep enough, it doesn't just freeze the skin, it freezes the will. In that kind of cold, survival doesn't feel like endurance. It feels like a race your body was never meant to win. Cramped confinement. The box is the first thing you notice. Not its size, but its limits. The edges sit close to your skin, close enough that every breath reminds you how little space you have left. Cramped confinement doesn't rely on force. It relies on the realization that there's nowhere to move. You're not restrained. You're contained. Once the door closes, your body becomes too big for itself. Knees grind into your chest. Shoulders fold inward. Muscles tense at angles that ache immediately. The air warms with your breath. Thick, stale, trapped. Then, time stops behaving normally. Minutes stretch. Hours blur. Your heartbeat becomes the loudest thing in the room. Here's what people underestimate. The body starts hurting in places you didn't know could hurt. Not from injury, but from stillness. Circulation slows. Limbs go numb. Pins and needles burn through your arms. Your spine feels like it's folding in on itself. But the detail survivors always mention is this. The moment the walls feel like they're leaning inward, even though they aren't, that's when the mental collapse begins. Cramped confinement plays with the oldest human fear, being trapped. Your breath feels loud. The darkness feels heavy. Every sound echoes, like it's happening inside your bones. Panic doesn't arrive all at once. It flickers, then grows, until every breath feels like a countdown to running out of space entirely. Some scratch at the walls, some beg to get out. Some fall silent, retreating inward because there's nowhere else to go. By the time the door opens, hours feel like days. Days feel like something worse. Abu Zubaydah spent hours in a coffin-sized box, his legs twisted until he shook uncontrollably. In an even smaller box, he couldn't sit upright at all. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's mind deteriorated under the pressure of tight confinement. Majid Khan described the experience as a slow-motion unraveling, silence mixing with darkness until his thoughts no longer felt like his own. Cramped confinement isn't loud or violent. There's no blow, no scream. It breaks people by turning space into a weapon. And after long enough in a box that small, the walls stop being the prison. The fear that follows you out becomes the new one. Mock executions. The human mind knows what death feels like long before it arrives. That's why mock executions work. They don't need bullets or blades, just the idea of the end, close enough for your body to believe it. One moment you're restrained. The next, you hear the click of a weapon, footsteps behind you, a whisper saying this might be your last breath. Your body reacts as if it's already over. A blank round fired near your head sounds real. A staged hanging feels real. Being forced to kneel while a gun cocks behind you ignites terror instantly, flooding the bloodstream in a single surge. Here's what people don't understand. Mock executions don't rely on violence. They rely on certainty. The certainty that this is it. Your pulse spikes, blood pressure jumps, your breath stutters, muscles tighten so hard they ache for days. But survivors always remember the same detail. Your body goes numb the same way it does moments before actual death, a cold rush spreading through the chest, as if your heart is trying to hide. Surviving what you thought was your last moment doesn't bring relief. It brings confusion, dread, and a fracture in trust that never resets. The fear doesn't fade when the threat fades. It lingers, replaying itself with nowhere to go. That's why interrogators used it. When someone believes they're about to die, truth becomes irrelevant. Survival becomes the only answer worth giving. Abu Zubaydah faced simulated gunshots realistic enough to freeze him. Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri endured staged shootings that cut deeper than any physical injury. Muhammad al-Qahtani was threatened with being shot, his unraveling mind pushed even closer to collapse. Mock executions leave no visible scars. They leave something worse, the memory of dying while still alive. And once your mind crosses that line, a part of you never stops waiting for the next shot. Dietary manipulation. Hunger doesn't strike all at once. It creeps, settling in your stomach, then your bones, then your thoughts. That's what makes dietary manipulation so effective. It weaponized something you can't escape. At first, it feels like discomfort, a hollow ache that comes and goes. Then, the meals shrink, the nutrients disappear, and the ache becomes constant, buzzing through your nerves like a reminder that your body is slowly being emptied out. Food stops being nourishment, it becomes control. You're given enough to stay awake, but never enough to feel whole. Your limbs shake, your mind fogs. Fatigue sits on you like a weight. Here's what most people never consider. The brain starts breaking long before the body does. Memory slips, logic slows, emotions swing wildly. Even time starts bending. Survivors describe bursts of anger or crying they couldn't explain, not because they were weak, but because hunger rewires the mind. Abu Zubaydah was starved until he couldn't stand. Muhammad al-Qahtani was denied food for days at a time, his body collapsing alongside his mind. Dietary manipulation doesn't rely on violence. It relies on erosion, letting hunger carve into strength, dignity, and identity until the only thing left is obedience. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're not fighting interrogation anymore. You're fighting your own body to keep what little is left. Sensory deprivation. Silence is harmless until it lasts too long. Darkness is harmless until it's the only thing you ever see. Sensory deprivation doesn't attack the body. It attacks the connection between the body and the world. The moment you're hooded, blindfolded, or locked in a pitch-black room, your mind starts reaching for signals that aren't there. And when it can't find them, it starts making its own. At first, the room feels quiet, just quiet. Minutes pass, and the quiet grows heavier. The air feels thicker. Every breath echoes inside your skull. Shapes shift behind your eyelids. The darkness feels textured, like it has weight. Here's what most people don't realize. Without sensory input, the brain loses the map of your body. You stop knowing where your hands are. Your legs feel farther away than they should. Your heartbeat feels like it's coming from outside your chest. The body tries to cope. Joints stiffen. Muscles ache from staying in the same position. Your internal clock collapses. Minutes feel like hours, hours like days. But the mind collapses first. Confusion becomes disorientation. Disorientation becomes fear. Fear becomes something the brain tries to explain. And that's when the hallucinations arrive. Shadows move, whispers drift through the dark. Some hear footsteps, some hear breathing. Some hear their own names. The mind fills the silence with anything it can. And the more desperate it is, the more vivid the creations become. This is why interrogators used it. A disoriented mind is easier to bend. When you can't tell night from day, when you can't trust your senses, when the world shrinks to a box of darkness, resistance dissolves. Abu Zubaydah spent long stretches in total darkness, emerging hollowed and disoriented. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed endured sensory deprivation layered with other techniques. Muhammad al-Qahtani's sense of reality warped after weeks in silence. Majid Khan drifted between panic and hallucination as sensory deprivation eroded his identity. Sensory deprivation leaves no marks. It leaves confusion. It leaves fear. It leaves a mind that no longer trusts itself. Because when the world disappears long enough, the silence starts speaking for it. And even when you're finally let out, a part of you keeps listening. Rectal hydration, feeding. Some techniques are meant to frighten. Some are meant to exhaust. This one is meant to do something worse, erase dignity. Rectal hydration and feeding don't start with pain. They start with a realization. Your body is no longer yours. What goes into it, how it functions. Someone else decides that now. The procedure isn't careful. It isn't necessary. It's punitive. You're restrained, exposed, unable to stop what happens next. Liquid is forced into the body in the wrong direction, a deliberate violation wrapped in clinical language. Here's what most people don't understand. The body reacts instantly, not with pain at first, but with rejection. Every muscle tightens, trying to push the intrusion out. A deep, twisting pressure radiates through the gut, a sensation survivors describe as your body folding in on itself from the inside. Then the pain arrives, sharp, deep, wrong, not just injury, the body screaming that something is fundamentally out of place. The physical consequences linger: tears, bleeding, infections, inflammation, soreness that makes sitting, walking, even breathing feel wrong. But the real damage is psychological. This isn't just about violating the body, it's about erasing personhood. Victims describe feeling dehumanized, reduced to something less than a person, reduced to a hole to be filled instead of a human being. Shame becomes its own torture. Fear becomes constant. Identity fractures under the weight of violation. Majid Khan was force-fed rectally after refusing food. He called it one of the most degrading experiences of his life. Mustafa al-Hawsawi suffered injuries severe enough to need medical care. Abu Zubaydah endured repeated procedures that carved deeper into his sense of self. Rectal hydration and feeding don't rely on fear alone. They rely on shame, the kind that burrows into identity and refuses to leave. Because once your body is used against you this way, the wound isn't just physical. It's the feeling that something was taken that can't be restored. And long after the pain fades, the violation stays, not in the body, but in the memory you can't put down. Isolation. Isolation doesn't start with fear. It starts with quiet, harmless in the first hour, heavy by the second, unbearable long before the third. Alone in a cell, cut off from voices, touch, time, or light, the world shrinks until it's just you and the echo of your own breathing. Interrogators don't need chains here. They let the silence do the work. The body feels it first. Muscles stiffen from stillness. Joints ache because nothing resets them. Breathing turns shallow without you noticing. Sleep becomes strange, drifting in and out, never sure if minutes or hours passed. Hunger dulls, thirst sharpens. Your heartbeat becomes the loudest sound in the room. Here's what most people never consider. When the world goes silent long enough, your thoughts start echoing like separate voices. You begin answering yourself just to fill the emptiness. That's when the unraveling begins. Anxiety arrives quietly. Then paranoia. Then something deeper. A sense that the room is shifting even though it isn't. Some hear footsteps. Some see movement in the corner of their eye. Some talk to themselves because silence feels too sharp. Others stop talking entirely, withdrawing into a place no one can reach. Time dissolves. Hope dissolves. Identity begins to erode. Survivors describe the same moment in different words. The realization that they no longer know where outside is, because the world has shrunk to the size of their own mind. Abu Zubaydah spent months in darkness, emerging hollowed and disoriented. Muhammad al-Qahtani lived in silent isolation until his mind fractured. Majid Khan drifted between despair and hallucination. Ramzi bin al-Shib endured such prolonged solitude that normal conversation became almost impossible afterward. Isolation doesn't bruise skin. It doesn't spill blood. It erodes identity, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. Because when the world disappears long enough, your mind tries to replace it. And when the door finally opens, the silence doesn't stay behind. It follows you, sits with you, answers for you. Long after you've left the room, the bruises fade, the wounds close. But the memories don't leave. They echo, they cling, they wait. That's the part the reports never captured, the part they tried to erase. Every secret has a cost, and some were paid in silence, shadows, and classified files. Thanks for watching Toon Sticky Nation from your trusty and slightly frazzled Sticky Note.